SlaughterHouse Five. Chapter 1. He had to show somebody what was in the bag. He had decided he could trust me. He caught my eye, winked, opened the bag. There was a plaster model of the Eiffel Tower in there. It was painted gold. It had a clock in it. There was a smashing thing, he said. And we were flown to a rest camp in France where we were fed chocolate, malted milkshakes, and other rich foods until we were all covered with baby fat. Then we were sent home, and I married a pretty girl who was covered with baby fat too, and we had babies. And they're all grown up now, and I'm old fart with this memories in this Pall Malls. My name is Jan Janssen. I worked in Wisconsin. I worked at a lumber mill there. Sometimes I try to call up an old girlfriend on the telephone late at night after my wife has gone to bed. Operator, wonder if you could give me the number of Miss So-and-so and think she lives at such and such. I'm sorry, sir, there's no such listing. Thanks, operator, thanks the same. And I let the dog out and I let him in and we talk some and I let him know I like him. And he lets me know he likes me. He doesn't mind the smell of mustard gas and roses. You're all right, Sandy, I'll say to the dog. You know that? Sandy, you're okay. Sometimes I'll turn on the radio and I'll listen to talk programs in Boston or New York, and I can't stand record music. If I've been drinking a good deal, sooner or later I go to bed, and my wife asked me, "What time is it?" she asked. "Has you known the time?" Sometimes I don't know, and I say, "Search me." I think about my education sometimes, and I went to the University of Chicago for a while after the Second World War. I was a student in the Department of Anthropology, and at that time they were teaching that there was absolutely no difference between anybody. They may be teaching that still. Another thing they taught was that nobody was ridiculous or bad or disgusting. Shortly before my father died, he said to me, "You know, you never wrote a story with that villain in it." I told him that the one things I learned in college after the war, while I was studying to be an anthropologist, I was also working with a police reporter in the famous Chicago City News Bureau for $28 a week. One time they switched me from night shift to the day shift, so I worked 16 hours straight. We were supposed to be all the newspapers in town and the AP and the UP and all that, and we would cover the courts and the police stations and the fire departments and the Coast Guards out on Lake Michigan and all that. We were concerned to the institutions and supported by means of pneumatic tubes which ran under the streets of Chicago. Reporters would telephone in stories to writers wearing headphones, and then the writers would stencil the stories on mimeograph sheets. The stories were mimeographed and stuffed into brass and velvet cartridges, which the pneumatic tubes ate, and the very toughest reporter and writers were women who had taken the job of men who'd gone to war. At the very story I covered, I had to dictate over the telephone to one of those beastly girls. It was about a young veteran who had taken a job running an old-fashioned elevator in the office building. The elevator door on the first floor was ornamental iron lace. Iron ivy snaked in and out of the holes. There was iron twig with two iron lovebirds perched upon it. This veteran decided to take his car into the basement and close the door and started down, but his wedding ring was caught in all the ornamentals, so he was hoisted into the air, and the floor and the car went down, dropped out from under him, and the top of the car squashed him, so it goes. So I phoned this in, and the woman who was going to cut the stencil asked me, "What did his wife say?" "She doesn't know yet," I said. "It just happened." "Call her up and get a statement." "What?" "Tell her you're the Captain Finn of the police department. Say you have some sad news, give her the news, and see what she says." So I did. She said that about what you were expected to say, there was a baby and so on, and got back to the office, and the woman writer asked me, just for her own information, what the squashed guy had looked like when he was squashed. I told her, "Didn't it bother you?" She said she was eating a Three Musketeers candy bar. "Heck no, Nancy," I said. "I've seen lots worse than that in war." Even then, I was supposedly writing a book about Dresden. It was a famous air raid back in the Air America. Not many Americans knew how much worse it had been than Hiroshima. For instance, I didn't know that either. There had been much publicity. I happened to tell a University of Chicago professor that a cocktail party about the raid, as I had seen it, about a book would write. He was a member of a thing called the Committee of Social Thoughts, and he told me about the concentration camps and about how the Germans had made soap and candles out of the fat of the dead Jews and so on. And all I could say was, I know. World War II had certainly made everybody very tough, and I became a public relations man for General Electric in Schenectady, New York, and a volunteer fireman in the village of Alphas, and where I bought my first home. My boss there was one of the toughest guys I ever hoped to meet. He had been a lieutenant colonel in the public relations in Baltimore while I was in the Schenectady, joined in the Dutch Reformed Church, which is very tough church indeed. He used to ask me if sneerily sometimes why I had been an officer, as though I had done something wrong. My wife and I had lost our baby fat. Those were out scrawny years. We had a lot of scrawny veterans and their scrawny wives for friends. The nicest veterans in Schenectady, I had thought the kindest, funniest ones were ones who hated war the most, were ones who had really fought. I wrote the Air Force back, then asking them for details about the raid on Dresden, who ordered it, how many planes did it, why did it, was desirable result had been, and so on. Was answered by a man who, like myself, was the public relations. He said that he was sorry, but that information was top secret still. I read the letter out loud to my wife, and I said, secret, my God, from whom? We were United World Federalists back then. I don't know what we were now, telephoners. I guess we telephone a lot, or I do anyways, late at night. A couple of weeks after I telephoned my old war buddy, Bernard V. O'Hare, I really did go to see him. That must have been in 1964 or so, whatever the last year it was for the New York World's Fair. Ihu Figus Lumate Ani, my name is Jan Janssen. There was a young man from Steenbouw. I took two little girls with me, my daughter Nanny and her best friend Allison Mitchell. They had never been off Cape Cod before. We had saw a river, we had stopped, they could stand by it, and I think about for a while. They had never seen water in that long and narrow, unsalted form before. The river was the Hudson. There were carp in there, and we saw them. They were big as atomic submarines. We saw waterfalls, two streams jumping off the cliffs into the valley of the Delaware. There were lots of things to stop and see, and then it was time to go. Always time to go. The little girls were wearing white party dresses and black party shoes, so strangers would know at once how nice they were. Time to go, girls, I'd say, and we would go. And then the sun went down, and we had supper at an Italian place, and then I knocked on the front door of a beautiful stone house of Bernard V. O'Hare. I was carrying a bottle of Irish whiskey like a dinner bell. I met his nice wife, Mary, to whom I dedicated this book. I dedicated it to Gerhard Mueller, the Dresden taxi driver, too. Mary O'Hare is a trained nurse, which is a lovely thing for a woman to be. Mary admired the two little girls I brought, mixed them in with her own children, and sent them all upstairs to play games and watch television. It was only after the children were gone that I sensed that Mary didn't like me, or didn't like something about the night. She polite but chilly. It was a cozy house you have there, I said, and it really was. I fixed up a place where you can talk about not bothered, she said. Good, I said, and I imagined two leather chairs near a fireplace in a paneled room where two old soldiers could drink and talk. But she took us into the kitchen, where she had put two straight back chairs in a kitchen table with white porcelain top table that was screaming with reflected light from 200-watt bulb overhead. Mary had prepared an operating room. She put only glass on it, which was for me. She complained that O'Hare couldn't drink the hard stuff since the war. So we sat down. O'Hare was embarrassed, but wouldn't tell me what was wrong. I couldn't imagine what it was about me could burn up in Mary. So I was finally family man. I had been married only once. I was a drunk. I had done her husband any dirt in the war. She fixed herself a Coca-Cola, made a lot of noise banging the ice cube trays in the stainless steel sink, and then she went into another part of the house. But she would sit still. She was moving all around the house, open and shuttered doors, even moving furniture around. Work off danger. I asked O'Hare what she said and done to make her act like that way. It's all right, she said. Don't worry about it. It doesn't have anything to do with you. That was kind of him. He was lying. It had everything to do with me.